when you start to notice what your heart rate is and be in tune with your biological body, you're going to be a better communicator.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Dojo podcast, where we bring real solutions to real health and wellness problems. Today, we're talking with Amber Dalsin, a registered psychologist and founder of Ember Relationship Psychology. Today, we're talking about how a healthy relationship can contribute to your healthy lifestyle. There's a ton of great information in this episode. I hope you enjoy it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wellness Dojo podcast. I'm Dr. Riley, here with my co-host, Kyle Crake. I'm the naturopathic ninja. He's the strength sifu. And today, we have an esteemed and honored guest with us. She's actually an old friend. But today, Amber Dalsin is better known as the registered psychologist and founder of Ember Relationship Psychology. She's a marriage and family therapist, and she teaches the public and clients alike how to take small actions, or at least start taking those small actions to really establish understanding amongst partners, or in other words, helping to save the world. One couple at a time. That's how I see it anyways.
Yes, totally that.
Amber, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited for this. You know, although we are health professionals in our own right, Kyle and I, relationship and family and marriage counseling and therapy is not something we delve into. It's a very specialized section of healthcare and of psychology. So thank you so much for sharing some of your expertise with us today. And before I go any further, I just want to mention to everyone, Ember with an E, emberrelationshipsychology.com. Is where you can go to,
which is different than my name, which starts with an A. We thought it'd be a play off of my name, but it ended up being actually quite confusing.
Right. I get it though, because like Ember, like you everything starts with a little spark, with a little ember, you foster it, and eventually it becomes this burning, passionate fire of an amazing relationship. So I really love the name. And it is a play on words. I get it. But yes, we are talking with Amber, and yes, go to emberrelationshipsychology.com. So what's really stood out for me, first of all, we are all old friends. We're part of the same Kung Fu school. And now I'm not going to totally date myself here, but Amber, the first time I saw you and met you, we're closing in on 30 years.
I know. And when I met Riley, his signature haircut was a bowl cut. Like, that's what I remember about Riley. Is
with
like
an undercut on the
long hair. Yeah, undercut, but like the long, and from the back, Riley and I actually used to look very similar.
We did. Yeah, no, this is true. I tried to have the undercut so I could differentiate myself a little bit as a 10-year-old boy.
As the boy band mushroom cut. Yeah.
Right. Well, in tournament, you know what you can do is you can slick your hair back and put it in a little ponytail bandage, and then they can see your undercut. And now suddenly it's like tournament style hair. So I really thought that was exciting.
It was.
Yeah. So how long now? You're the owner and founder of Ember Relationship Psychology. How long has that been going on for now?
Really, I started it in the pandemic. So I registered my official business in 2016, but then just like kind of had it quietly sitting there. And then I worked for another company until the pandemic. And in March 2020, I was in Chile when the whole pandemic thing came down and they declared martial law in Chile. We were there a few days when things were still open. And then one day everything's open, cruise ships are coming to port. The next day, cruise ships are out at sea and you can see them there. They're not letting them come in. And then the next day they're declaring martial law. So then we came home. We were supposed to be in Chile for 10 more days. And I got home and had 10 days off with like nothing to do. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to start writing content. I'll like build a course, which is what came to my head. I was going to write it about COVID and COVID anxiety, and then kind of got going on that and then decided to scrap it because I decided I did not want to be talking about that. If I like took off, that was not something I wanted to do for the foreseeable future, but it got things kind of slowly moving. And then with the pandemic hitting, I was working for an independent group practice where I worked as a sole practitioner, and I was paying for office space in Min. And I was like, hold on, why am I paying for office space in Min when I'm not going to the office anymore? So I already had this business started and registered, and I was like, you know what, now's the time. So really in 2020, things got started. So it's been over a year that I've been officially with myself.
Wow. And it's so impressive because you've really hit the ground running. And what's caught my attention is is the quality of output that you're putting out there onto social media. You're not just giving little hints and little this and that. Like sometimes you're giving a nice evidence-based, no, here are 4 things that you can do or 5 things that you can do. And it's really great content and really great quality stuff, and really shows that you know what you're talking about. And so is the main, one of the main courses that I see is the communication cures. Is that the one that you're talking about that you developed?
Yeah, so that's that's my main course right now. That is communication cures. So that's a course designed for couples to help them to communicate better. So whether it's you just want to feel more heard and understood, or you want to stop having blowout fights, like that's the course that I have designed for couples to really help them with their communication. And then right now, kind of because of request, a lot of people, the biggest question I ask is, can I do this? Can I do this alone? Mm-hmm. So right now I'm in the process of building a course for individuals so they can work on their own healing within relationship and their communication there too. So that'll be out probably in 2 months, I would say.
Awesome. And do you have a name for that one?
No, I'm still coming up with that.
Okay, that's the hardest part. Yeah. Well, every step is the hardest part, but the name, it's like, yeah, it's got to be just right. Yeah. Okay. So I want to start out by talking about this concept that I came across fairly recently, and it's something to the tune of rupture and repair. I found it so interesting because, I don't know, we talk a lot about, how we want like quick gratification. We want things to be easy these days, and we shy away from conflict and things like that because it's so easy just to retreat these days and distract yourself and things like that. But this concept of rupture, repair, and relationship came up. And I just found it fascinating because instead of shying away from all conflict, from shying away from everything, there might actually be value in these micro ruptures in your relationship cycle, or as in your relationship life cycle as you progress through. Because when you have disconnection, when you have a rupture, it's a fantastic learning opportunity. You can learn a lot from each other. Maybe it's an opportunity to be vulnerable and things like that. So in intimate relationships, when conflict is just something that you cannot detour around, it's something that you have to face. How do you feel about this concept of not only rupture, but the repair phase, and how it can actually strengthen relationships?
Yeah, totally. So, conflict and rupture is a normal part of all relationships. Even relationship, like happily married people have been together 25 plus years, they're going to have rupture as well. And what rupture is like we missed a connection in the way that we wanted, or we haven't understood each other. So you can think of a lot of conflict as certainly an opportunity to get to know each other better. But what happens is that conflict piece is normal. But if we repair it, we're going to get stronger and rebuild our relationship. It's going to feel better. But if we just leave it, we're going to start drifting further and further apart. So what research has found, Gottman's research has found in particular, is that a lot of the time we are primed to get it wrong. We are primed to be in conflict with our partner. Because if I think of myself in my own head, I'm thinking about my business, I'm thinking about my clients, I'm thinking about sports, I'm thinking about my friends, I'm thinking all day about all the things going on in my own head. While I might appear physically free to my partner, there's always gears turning up in my brain, whether they're going fast or going slow. Mm-hmm. So although he could see me, he doesn't know if I'm actually free or not. And the same is true of him. He might look free, but he's got his own things, whether it be hockey, business, like his buddies, whatever he's up to. And so because we look free, but we're not, it's infrequent that we're actually both mentally free at the same time. And the Gottmans parse that down to they suggest that 9% of the time you're actually free at the same time as your partner, which leaves the rest, 91% of the time, we are primed for missing connection with our partner. We are primed to getting it wrong. So if we're not really both free and mentally ready to be chatting, it's going to be really easy to miss when your partner wants your attention, your connection, your affection. So ruptures can be really small. I can give you an example of last night. So I'm a very finicky steak eater. We grew up in my house, everything was cooked to burnt. So I, eat my steak. I would say I eat it medium well, but the truth is I eat it like basically well done. I'll settle for medium well. And if you cook it medium, it won't cross my lips. So most people try to convert me to being a medium rare steak eater, but it's just never going to happen. And my husband for years, he's tried to convert me, but eventually he's come around to that, I'm not going to do it. So he tried to cook it to medium well, but when I cut into it, it was a solid, we'll call it medium.
Okay.
Sure. Might have been medium rare. And I cut it open and we had a brief rupture. And I looked at it and I said, nope. And he's like, well, I cooked it to like this way. And I was like, well, it's still not ready. And he kind of gets upset because he's put effort into this. And we have this moment where if I say one more thing, I know we are fighting. It's on. Yeah. We're talking about the cooked level of a steak. Like we are not talking about anything important, but it's just been one of those things that comes up between us so frequently because I'm so fussy about it. And he does put in effort, but it's still not going to cross my lips. And certainly I'm sure he feels unappreciated, whatever. And our tones are both getting kind of snappy. We're talking about steak. So we're starting to have a rupture. Now, ruptures are best caught within the first kind of 3 minutes of your conflict. The sooner you can catch it, the better. Because if you think about the times where you've said hurtful things you don't mean, or you've stormed off in a like all enough for whatever, chances are it's later on in the conflict.
Yeah, it's been building. Yeah.
Exactly. So the sooner you can catch it, the better you can do. So I had this brief moment of awareness where I thought, if I say one more thing, we are having a battle. Do I want to battle tonight about my steak? And thought, no, I don't. So knowing my husband is another thing I have to do. So I have to figure out, like, given who my partner is, what is the best way to respond to my partner? So my partner is better with silence sometimes. Like, don't talk, which is different from me. If you change the topic and you ask me a question about something else, or you say like, oh, sorry, I'm going to respond better to that. But knowing who my husband is, I just kind of stayed silent for a bit, maybe like a minute or two. And then once I decided enough steam had passed, I like changed the topic because he needs like a second to cool. And I also knew I was going to go put my steak back on the grill, but I chose that was not the time to do it because I knew it was going to flare everything up. So what part of awareness is recognizing how you're going to kind of make this better and choosing to prioritize the overall peace in your relationship. So repairs can be done in cognitive and emotional ways. So what that is saying, like a cognitive repair would be to talk about the situation. So for me, this would be to say, I know you tried really hard to get the steak cooked right. I know you first sous vide'd it and then you cooked it on the barbecue. So I know you tried and it just wasn't there. So I'm making a cognitive repair. I'm talking about the facts and acknowledging the situation. Okay. However, research shows that typically emotional repairs do better than cognitive repairs. So an emotional repair is like, I see that you really tried and you did a good job. Or maybe you're feeling attacked that I'm upset about my steak. Let me just be a little softer. Or asking him a question about something unrelated or changing the topic to something unrelated. Okay. So we can repair in a lot of different ways. But the repair is all about how do you make those ruptures better? How do you make the kind of the tear that happened in that relationship better? How do you like stitch it up? And again, the sooner we do that, the easier it is.
Okay. Yep. So there's a time dependent variable here,
yes,
which totally makes sense because these things can gain momentum, can't they? And like you can almost they start it's the small snowball, and then they just build and build and build, and before you know it, they're big enough to smash a whole little town, you know. And so that's really interesting that there's a little bit of time dependency there. And I also found it interesting talking about the difference between cognitive and emotional, because it sounded to me like cognitive is kind of breaking it down maybe intellectually, and then emotional is a little bit more about like getting in tune with the emotions of the other person and at least recognizing them, and then maybe some sort of combination of positive reinforcement too, to soften the blow. Is that accurate enough?
Yeah, I mean, if you can add positive reinforcement, absolutely. The kinder we are, the more positives we add, the better it's going to go.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, where do couples get lost with this? Because let's say you have a couple who's been together for 10 years now and they're missing the mark in these areas. Is it a level of approaching things? I talk a lot about like being curious about situations. Is there a level of curiosity that helps people to basically learn about each other and understand each other? The cues, like you were just talking about, like you knew that in that instance, silence was best for your husband's needs. How do people get to that point? How do people start to understand each other better? Is it just listening? Is it curiosity? What is it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you asked two things. Where do we go wrong and being curious? But if we speak to that curiosity part, I guess, well, start with where do we go wrong? So where we go wrong a lot of the time is we just sit with ourselves and we do things from our own point of view in our own heads, forgetting our partner is a separate entity with a separate view on the world and a separate set of preferences. And we are two independent objects that need to work together to have an overall harmonious life. And when we can think of our partner as a teammate, so if you think of like playing soccer, if I'm on the field and we're playing indoor soccer, if I'm on the field with, 5 other people are playing, if I play just solo, that's going to be really hard for me to win the game. But as soon as I start passing to other people on my team or utilizing their skills, we have a much better chance at winning. Same thing with your partner. We have to recognize that they can be our teammate and we'll get farther along. So one of the biggest things people do that makes them go wrong is we sit back and we try to get our partner to see the world from our perspective only, or we like forget their whole other entity with their own strengths and weaknesses and different challenges. And so where we go wrong is we stop having tolerance for the fact that they're different than us. And one of the biggest things that we can do to attune is be tolerant that someone is different than you, which slides then into being curious. So when we can be curious about our partner, what we do when we're intolerant of someone else's different beliefs, values, the way they show up in the world is we judge them. We're like, so let's imagine I judge my husband's cooking. I'm like, you just eat your steak wrong. That's what people say about me, but like, you do this wrong. He's going to feel defensive. He's going to feel on edge. Instead, I come to this and I go, we have two different sets of preferences. Neither is right. Neither is wrong. They're just different. If we can approach it from a state of difference and then be curious about the other people's view, curiosity helps us step away from being judgmental. When we can step into being curious about our partner and why they did what they did, that's also going to help us slide into empathy. And when we're feeling quite frustrated or hurt or overwhelmed, it can be hard to be empathetic towards your partner. So one of the keys to empathy is being curious about why on earth they did what they did. And if we can tap into that, having tolerance for different set of views and being a bit more curious and empathetic, that's going to help us understand a rupture and be more open to repairing. But a key to repairing where we go wrong is not being willing. A lot of the time, a lot of repair has to do with, are you willing to make it better? Are you willing to be curious?
And
a lot of people aren't willing.
Yeah. And are you willing to put your opinions and beliefs aside for a moment to try and understand them, right?
Exactly. And some of us in the heat of the moment are not willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in that heat of the moment. I could imagine that it takes a little bit of coaching, the same way that you would do it individually. And it's like, if you have, let's say, impulsive thinking, the first thing to do is, well, you have to cultivate an awareness of what an impulsive thought is. And I would imagine it's similar with two people. It's like you have to cultivate an awareness of when that moment arises, when the mercury in the thermostat starts rising a little bit. It's like when to recognize what it is, and then you need some simple strategies of what to do next, right? And then not only that, then it's practice and repetition. So is it kind of similar? Because I know, that would be like the basis of CBT, as an individual. Is it kind of a similar thing amongst couples too? And yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about the mercury rising, like in the thermometer, but actually, so what we know is there's an optimal nervous system state to be in conflict conversation with your partner. So if you're seated at rest and you're not a high level professional athlete, you're an average person. If you're seated at rest, your heart rate should not exceed 100 beats per minute in a conflict conversation with your partner.
Okay.
If you're in a conflict conversation with your partner, your heart rate's exceeded 100 beats per minute, chances are you're going to start saying things you don't mean. You're going to shut down. You're going to disengage because your nervous system has actually gone into fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
And we don't respond well then. And so if you can begin to be aware of noticing that mercury rising, which is noticing your nervous system becoming escalated, we go into diffuse physiological arousal. If we can notice that and work to calm down, re-regulate our nervous system, we're going to have much better conversations. So this is one of the things I go over actually in the course Communication here, is just giving you some tools for how to start to notice, whether that's wearing a smartwatch or a pulse oximeter or checking your heart rate. When you start to notice what your heart rate is and be in tune with your biological body, you're going to be a better communicator. And then to be able to hold off on your side, that is a skill, because we have impulsive thoughts, and a lot of conversation, it makes our conversations more lively, better when we interrupt and we share what's on our mind. But there are times with our partner where you have to wait. You have to wait and not say a thing. And that takes practice, willingness, and effort, and being regulated enough in your body to actually wait.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I love that concept of having some sort of biofeedback mechanism telling you what your heart rate is, because I bet people don't realize that. And some of those watches will even beep at you if it's over a certain amount. Yeah. Right? Imagine it gets to 99 or 100 and it beeps. It's like, okay, that's my cue to just be silent for a little bit and maybe use a grounding technique or breathe slowly, something like that.
That's exactly what we can do to repair. So let's imagine you and your spouse both have smartwatches and one beeps. As soon as it beeps, that is, you should have some prearranged agreement of what you're going to do. But what you should do is break. Go calm down, then come back.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Putting physiology into it.
That's right.
I like that.
Can you speak a little bit to the that idea of just one thing that really struck a chord with me? You talked about like knowing when to be silent or when to bite your tongue almost. I know I've run into it with in my relationship where sometimes I'll be silent because I feel like I need to diffuse the situation, but then that silence is not well received. It's like, well, why'd you shut down? Like, we need to talk about this right now. And I think that comes to that understanding as well, maybe of like what they need versus what I need, and then just communicating that process and, learning from, we're talking about rupture and stuff and learning from it. Is that an opportunity then for people to look at that and go, okay, I need to learn how to approach the situation better, and we need to talk about, what did I do in that argument that worked well for you and what didn't work well for you? And I think that's a big thing that people sometimes aren't willing to step into the ring after an argument and say, okay, let's reassess this argument and see how we did.
Yeah. So what we often have is like a mismatch in emotionalness between partners. So one is more comfortable wading into the conflict, they're more comfortable talking about it. They want to engage in the uncomfortable conversation that makes them feel better. And then there's the other partner that's like, breaks, get me out of here. I do not like this conflict. Can we cool it? Very calm where I'm not engaging. So many people have a mismatch in there. And like you said, Kyle, you're right. It's couples need to kind of come together and be willing to talk about what are our different styles? What do we want? So for my partner, he'd probably prefer if I just didn't say anything sometimes, or I need to work on being really level. So I have a big emotional range, high highs, low lows, and many women relate to that. Between our cycles and our emotional range is just different. It tends to be wider. Not all women, but many women relate to that. And certainly some men have that wide emotional range, but not all of them quite relate to that. Certainly some do, but not all. So these are sweeping over generalizations. So whether that's social conditioning, so many boys from small age, you're told like, don't cry, that's weak, don't express emotion. So naturally it makes sense. You grow up, you're not going to do that. Whereas for little girls, in most cases, that's more acceptable. So for most opposite gender relationships, we're taught different messages about emotion for most of our lives. So it's no surprise that when you get into a relationship with an opposite gender person, that you're going to struggle with your emotional expression. Now, certainly that's a sweeping over generalization, but can be generally true. So that being said, most men, not all men, tend to shut down or stonewall in high conflict conversations. I think 85% about, whereas that's not typically the response that women do. So typically that's happening when your heart rate exceeds 100 beats per minute, you shut down. For men in that way. Yeah. The antidote to that is taking a break and re-engaging in a calmer way. Mm-hmm. But this is being willing to know your partner and understand the way you both show up. So if I know that that's my partner, my job would be to approach probably with more calmness, to work on my delivery of a message and make it safe to stay engaged so that my partner's heart rate can stay under 100 beats per minute as we talk about the hard thing. So there's effort on my part. Now, on the other hand, if my partner prefers to not get into it, but I need that emotional connection, like for me, that feels emotional connection to work through something. It feels like we're sharing the load, the labor. My partner has to work to stay engaged when My partner would rather probably do anything else in the world. But that means expressing could be empathy. So if I'm talking about I'm upset because all my clients were late today, even if he doesn't care, to say, yeah, that must be frustrating. Or if we're talking about house cleaning around the house and I'm expressing frustration because I feel like I do more, for him to be able to say, yeah, that sounds hard, or ask me open-ended questions to stay engaged, to have the conversation. But we both have to be willing to do different things based on what our partner's strengths and weaknesses are, and be able to think about what they need from their perspective, not from our own.
Yeah. So I would say that there should be a third R, and it's like rupture, repair, and review, if you can, afterwards, to learn a little bit more about each other. And I know that that's happened in my relationship as well. We've had to, after the repair, we've made a point to talk about it and get to know each other's needs a little bit more. And then there's always just a little bit of give and take. And that's just really what's needed, for sure. And I'm just blown away to hear that 9% stat that you mentioned earlier about when we're actually available, because that is me. I'll be sitting there and in my head I'm going, okay, I just finished the workday, and so now is my time to relax. But in my partner's eyes, it's like, now my partner's available because they're done work, right? And that is just that. I mean, it's not surprising to hear that, but it is at the same time, because it just makes so much sense. So I'm going to try to be a little bit more available than 9%. Maybe that.
I heard an interesting thing. I was talking with somebody in a group setting, and they mentioned that this struggle between like having to be on all the time, and you finish your workday and you're exhausted, and then you have to like your spouse wants to tell you all about their day and you just don't have the energy. And the person I was talking to was also a coach, and they put it in a way that really resonated with me. Is they're like, okay, I just had all these coaching clients or whatever the case might be, where I was giving my energy to everybody else throughout the day. And when I walk in the door, like I try and remind myself that I'm about to step into the most important session of the day, right? And be present for those people. And that's something that really resonated with me too, is like, yeah, like you can be on all day with, the people who are, paying your bills, so to speak. But what are you doing for the people that, quote unquote, truly matter in your life, right? One thing that I wanted to touch on too is we're talking a lot about like learning about your spouse and stuff. Is there a level of willingness that people need to teach their spouse or their significant other or even their kids and just any relationship? Is there a level of willingness and ownership that you need to take on teaching people what you need as well, and not just expecting them to just figure it out?
Yes. Popular culture has done us a huge disservice when it comes to this. I read this post the other day on Instagram, and if we weren't recording live, I'd pull this up, because it's like, if you find your soulmate, they should just know how to handle your highs and lows and like meet all your expectations. And I was like, what? I made a reel, and the reel shows this tile, and then my part is saying, who told you that? How should your soulmate know? Like, what? So, okay, yes. Should you meet a lovely partner that is great for you, chances are you like that partner and having some chemistry because you get it right naturally a lot of the time. Thank goodness, or you probably wouldn't have made it past a few dates, right? Like, why would you go out with that person more than a few times if they didn't get it at least a little right? But then, because you're different people, you grew up in different families with different beliefs and values in some areas, you had different cultural conditioning, like, you're not always going to know. And we do have this myth in popular culture, whether it's from a Disney movie or some random person posting some stuff on Instagram about what your soulmate should know. Like, we think our partner should just know. And if we have to ask them to do something for us, the most common objection I get was, if I ask them, then it's not genuine, then it doesn't count. So yes, we totally have to be willing to, 1, ask, and 2, let it count if they do the thing that we have asked for. Yeah. And if you can, switch your mindset away from being like, if I had to ask them, then it doesn't count, to something like, I asked them, and this is something that doesn't come naturally to them. So, wow, they must really care about me if they're willing to do a thing that they don't naturally do. So yeah, huge willingness required there.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that comes up a lot when I'm working with clients, and I'm sure you see this too, Dr. Riley, with when people are trying to make healthy changes in their life. One of the most common things of a struggle that people bring up to me is my spouse isn't on board with my healthy changes, right? And I always tell them, like, well, have you told them and really like helped them to understand why it's really important for you to make that change in your life? Because oftentimes there's this analogy of crabs in a bucket. I'm sure you've heard it, where when one crab tries to get out of the bucket, all the other crabs try and pull that crab back down into the bucket. And I always tell people, when people feel resistance in your relationships, it's not necessarily because they don't want you to succeed, but oftentimes it's because they don't understand that process, and it's easier to just like clinch on and like hold you back. But when we can teach people, why is this important to me? Why do I need you to be a part of this process? Or why is it important that you continue to be a part of this process? Does that help people? Is that an important step for people when they're trying to make healthy changes in their relationship or in their own lives?
Oh my gosh, yes. So if we think about things that make a relationship work, and in particular emotional intimacy, so there is a component of what we call love map. And what a love map is knowing and understanding your partner's inner world and staying updated on that. Now, love maps are something, if you think about early dating, we're asking lots of questions like, where did you grow up? What are your favorite childhood memories? What books do you like? What we're doing is we're gathering information about that person, which is building a mental map of that person's inner world in our head. So natural. We do it in early dating. Now, when you start spending every day with someone, you stop asking, what's your favorite food? How has your life changed lately? What's exciting to you? What are your goals this year? We don't, for whatever reason, continue asking these questions that promotes the development of a mental map of your partner inside our head. The questions you're asking, the questions you're suggesting telling your partner about is updating that mental map. So what happens is, as the years change, as the months pass, we change, we grow as people. And it's both partners' mutual responsibility to update your love maps of each other's inner worlds. And we do that by sharing, as I'm changing, as my new goal is weight loss or changing my body or whatever reason, here's how come. And sharing that information allows you to update your partner's love map about you. We assume that people should just spontaneously know how we're changing and growing. But heck, some days, I live in my own skin. I'm surprised at how I'm changing and growing 1 month to the next month, because we're always evolving. And so we need to share those things with our partner. Usually our partners do much better if we can explain the impact something has on us or how come it matters to us. So if we can share that, it's more likely to get our partner on board. Not guarantee, but it's more likely to get them on board than if we just share kind of the surface level thing. Share why it matters to you.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. There's a little bit of a light that went off in my head there as well too, about how things are constantly growing and evolving, and we probably get complacent with our partners, maybe assuming that we're seeing it all when we're truly not, because we are probably just seeing the surface and we're not checking in about that deeper level, as you mentioned. And now I know that you're you're very research driven and evidence based. I heard a number thrown out there, and maybe you can confirm or maybe you don't know it, but I heard a number saying that you should aim to spend somewhere to the tune of 15 quality minutes a day. Can't remember it was, 100 minutes a week or 90 minutes a week with your partner communicating, actually communicating in order to keep that up. And now I'm thinking that was, if you're communicating for just 90 minutes a week, you're probably going to actually get to some of this stuff. You're probably going to get to the updated love mapping kind of thing. Had you heard any figure like that in papers you've come across?
So what I'm familiar with is the Gottman's research on small things often. So I have a free guide, 6 Small Things Successful and Loving Couples Do, which I'll give you guys the link to. And if you download this free guide, it has a number of sections that helps you to check in with your partner. This is based on the Gottman's research. So it's 2 minutes a day for departures. So this is saying goodbye. Hope you have a good day. You're going to have asked the day before, do you have a meeting or something? Part of a love map is if your partner says, I have an important meeting, you remember it. And when they go out the door, you say, hope your meeting goes well. So there's 2 minutes there. Departures. When you come home at the end of the night, one of the things that Gottman suggests is reunions, which is about 20 minutes where you're talking and you're updating each other on your day. So maybe what was the best part? Yeah. What was most stressful? walk me in detail through your day. What happened? And so it's like 10 minutes a person. It doesn't have to be 20 full minutes. And this is just 5 days a week where you're staying updated. So that is building that love map. And then one of the other things they work into their time communicating is to have what they call like a State of the Union meeting, or like a meeting where you sit down and you talk about the runnings of your relationship, whether that's budgeting, finances, kids, housework, planning dates, whatever. So I have this broken down in the 6 small things. So you can see these different areas of communication that helps couples to just build healthy habits that promote the longevity of your relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some people might listen to that and think like, oh, that seems so formal and so daunting of like, oh, we have to set aside these like meetings now, but they can be very practical ways of doing this. You can go for an evening walk every single night with your spouse. You can do a fitness class together and, you walk to it, or you can go for a drive and get a coffee. Like, there's very practical ways you can do this. I think it just comes down to what you kind of touched on before, right? Is that willingness to ask the sometimes difficult questions, or to create a little bit of vulnerability within that relationship. I think so I know I have in the past. I've been married for 11 years now. We have 3 kids. And so, there's been a lot of learning along the way. And one big thing that I had to learn was that you don't always have to protect away from the potential argument, or the potential that you don't like the answer they're going to give you, those types of things, because that's often where a lot of the true learning and growth happens, is asking those difficult questions and kind of preparing yourself for whatever answer might come, and be curious about it and not have your guard up about it.
Yeah, totally. And I love what you said about making some of those things a bit more natural or practical. So these are timelines,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, a lot of the couples I work with, they don't say goodbye to their partner in the morning. Mm-hmm. So even just like run up the stairs, give your partner a kiss, say bye, or at the very least, like holler bye, or send a nice text message that says, bye, sweetheart. Hope you have a nice day. I mean, great if you do it in person, but just think of these little ways that you can do it. Or 20 minutes. It could be sitting down over dinner. It doesn't have to be like, now we're gonna, I don't know, stand in the kitchen staring at each other awkwardly and talking. Like, build it in. What could be a nice way to connect that feels good given your lifestyle, right? So
yeah.
I've noticed too that it doesn't always have to come from verbal communication either. Sometimes it's understanding certain things that are stressing your spouse out. Like, for example, if I know that my wife gets like really stressed out when the kitchen is messy, sometimes it's about doing the dishes, and I didn't even have to say a word to her, but she comes out and sees that the dishes have been done, and she's like, oh, awesome, I don't have to worry about the dishes now. It's like, thank you. And then there's like, you can just like feel the energy is good in that relationship, because you knew what they needed, or you knew what would help, and you took action on it. It doesn't always have to be verbal. Is that true?
Oh, Kyle, what you just talked about is you have an inner love map of your wife, and you have remembered what matters to her. So it's our love maps are built by verbal information and also the nonverbal. And then we demonstrate our knowledge of our love map by taking action. So you just demonstrated that some things about her.
It's no big deal. It's no big deal.
It's no big deal. I'm great.
And now correct me if I'm wrong, but is that a segue into love languages as well? By him doing actions, is that also him showing how he communicates love? And can we maybe jump into love languages here for a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So love languages are an interesting one. They get praise and criticism. So whether you believe in love languages or not, like Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, has made this a viral phenomenon. So whether or not you believe in them or not, here's one thing I like to think about. If you can learn what matters to your partner, whether we call it a love language or not, and treat them in a way that they feel good, that's going to help your relationship. For most of our lives, we're taught the golden rule: do unto others as you want done unto you. Generally, great advice, except in relationships. Sometimes the advice is do unto your partner as they want done unto them. Mm-hmm. Platinum rule. And one way of understanding that is through the love languages. So what Kyle's example, let's imagine we could conceive that one thing that's important to his wife would be acts of service, doing things around the house that demonstrate his care for her, take some load off of her. If that matters to her, then great. Bucket filled up. Mm-hmm. So that could be one of the love languages.
And then, but what happens then, and this might happen, let's say in my relationship or in relationships past, where that's how I try to show, but it doesn't matter so much to the other person, right? That because theirs might be physical touch or something like that. And that's why you need to know yourself, you need to know the other person, and you need to share it amongst each other, and then you need to practice. Just that simple, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's where the teaching aspect of it comes in big, right? Because how am I supposed to know what my spouse's love language is, or just how they want to be received, or how they want to be approached, and those types of things? How would I ever know that unless I either ask or unless they tell me? Like, hey, I actually don't like it when you come up behind me and give me a kiss. Like, I actually don't like it when you sneak up on me like that, or like whatever the case might be, right? Or, I don't like it when you ask me right at the end of my day, how was your day? Like, I need time to digest and stuff. Like, these are things that we would have no idea. We think we're doing the best thing for our spouse or our partner. And you learn that, like, oh, I thought you liked that. Like, I liked that, so I thought you liked that. Or you haven't said anything in the past, so I thought you enjoyed it. Like, those types of things I think are really big.
Totally. And we need coaching. So we're all in martial arts, but we were all very good. We only got there by being coached on what to do properly and what like not to do wrong. And we all got to a very high level. And I certainly know without the coaching I received and then practice, I wouldn't have excelled to the level that I got to in my life. And I'm sure you two can probably relate to that. But for some reason, we're resistant to this in our relationships.
Yeah.
It's true.
I don't know. I feel like there's still just so much narrative out there in the ethos about how once you meet the person, it just all falls into place. Like, it's still in every, so many stories and movies and TV and things like that. I mean, I think maybe that's one of the reasons. And I didn't mean to laugh there about the sneaking up. I just had I just had a view in my, like, you had a katana sword, you had the smoke, and you just appeared and kissed. And like, stop that.
That's my ninja kiss.
Yeah.
Take it back.
Yeah, but
I have kind of like a broader question for you, Amber. And I think you'll be as surprised as I was with this, but I put something out to my community, my members community. I put out a poll on, when you think of personal wellness, which area like comes to mind the most? And I said exercise, nutrition, relationships, and there was one other, or stress was the other one. And not a single person chose relationship as their thing that came up when they talked about personal wellness. And for me, when I saw that, I was very, very surprised because, for me, relationships, I think, is probably number one when it comes to personal wellness in my life when I look at that. Can you speak to just the impact that healthy relationships in general can have on a person's just personal health, personal wellness?
Yeah, so I'll tell you this stat as well. People who are in unhappy relationships die 4 years earlier than people who are in happy relationships.
I believe that.
And people in happier relationships live longer than single people as well, as long as like they're happy relationships. So, I mean, just think about a day you had a fight with your partner. And that morning you woke up, you had a fight. How productive was the rest of your day?
It can make it a 9 out of 10 bad, 10 out of 10
right?
bad for me. It can be one of some of the worst days of the whole year.
Yep.
For me. Yeah.
And totally. So like most of us, if I've had a fight with my partner that morning, my workout's going to be crap. I might want to eat some comfort food. Like I can't focus. I'm not productive. So if your relationship isn't good, I don't know. Just think of a time you've had a fight with your partner. Tell me how good the rest of your day was. But if you think of a good relationship, what a good relationship does is it gives you a place to springboard, like leap further, do more in your life, because you're like, yeah, that person has my back. So I can venture a little further. And even if things go wrong, there's a supportive person at home that I can turn to that's going to catch me if I fall. And when we know we have that, we do so much more. It's the backbone. That's why it's important you choose a solid partner, because if you've been in a bad relationship, you know how the rest of your life suffers. But in a lot of popular culture, we don't think about, we think about our health. We think about food, exercise, illness. We're not really taught about relationships, but you're right. It matters very much.
Yeah. I mean, we're taught self-care, but not how to care for your relationship as a separate entity,
and how to make that relationship work for you in your life too, right? I think it's like you mentioned the soccer team analogy. I think that's a big thing. It's like when you look at relationships, whether it's romantic relationships or whether it's friendships and stuff like that, but like those relationships that you choose and that you keep and how you nourish those relationships, I think so strongly impact how you actually go about living your own life too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, I have a question. I don't know if it's a great question, but I'll ask it anyways. If couples really never fight or argue, can this be a warning sign of complacency and indifference almost? Or can you just have a healthy relationship where you don't fight or argue and the pieces do really fall into place and that's just your relationship?
So there are different kinds of stable long-term relationship styles.
Mm-hmm.
There is one kind of stable long-term relationship style that's a bit more avoidant, and they don't really talk about as many issues.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible.
Okay. And now when you say avoidant, that's part of the attachment styles, which you also have a free resource for?
I do have a free resource. So this is different than like an avoidant attachment. This is more like, I mean, they might have avoidant attachment, but they might, but not, they also might not. That's, I guess, one misconception. We hear avoidant, we think avoidant attachment style. Sometimes that could be true, but we also have people that on like a continuum of how much they like to talk about things and approach things. And like on one side, talk about everything. And the other side, like, I'd prefer not to.
Sure.
Some people like partner with a person that they both are more on the side of like, I'd prefer not to talk about all these things. We can, but I prefer not to. They might still be, so securely attached exists on a continuum. So they might have some more avoidant tendencies, but they could still be securely attached, or they might be avoidantly attached. But there's just a stable long-term partnership that they just tend to not talk about as many issues.
Okay.
Now, chances are, though, they're also not going to be that emotionally close. Like they're going to lack some depth in things, and they could probably benefit by talking about more things, but you can have a stable long-term relationship that doesn't talk about as many things.
Right.
That being said, there's obviously going to be gaps there because you can grow apart. If you're not growing together, you're probably slowly drifting.
Right. Yeah. And
apart.
I think that's more what I was getting at too. And that was well put. You could be growing apart if that's happening. And you got to be updating your love map, right? That's
Yes.
what I've learned today.
Well, defining what an argument is, I think also.
Yeah.
Right? An argument for you and your partner might be different from an argument from me and my partner.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Like we might look at what you, I mean, I don't know for sure, but just as a random example, like you might tell me about an argument that you had. And, you know, if I'm sitting with my spouse and you're telling us about it, we might afterwards be like, oh, that's an argument. Like for us, an argument is like screaming matches or something like who knows? But like, I think it depends on how you approach it a little bit as well, because again, if you can approach an argument as like with curiosity and with like a learning mindset, then it really takes away the butting of heads, and rather it actually is it's a more of a conversation. Like an argument can just be a form of conversation, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, especially if it's more in that effective spirit of like the rupture and repair that we were talking about earlier, it could actually be healthy. Amber, I know the time just always flies, and I know. We're running a bit short of time. I want to cover just one more quick thing, and that's within the realm of emotional intimacy. And the reason I want to cover it is because physical intimacy, everyone knows what that is, right? It's very intuitive. But for some people, probably a lot of men, emotional intimacy is something that isn't so automatic, and it may even have to be learned. So is it fair to say that proper communication is a precursor to emotional intimacy? And how would you even, take that away and define it?
Yeah, so emotional intimacy can be broken down into a lot of parts. So emotional intimacy, I actually have a little mini course on it.
Perfect.
Like $29 American, so it's pretty cheap. But
there you go.
It's broken down into 7 parts, which I outline and give some practical strategies to. So communication is one of them, and I call it, I believe I call it understanding in the course. But essentially, what that is starting to build some love maps and like talking, updating each other's inner worlds. If you think about knowing someone, then the more you know someone, the closer you feel to them. So talking is part of it. I have what's turning towards. So noticing, responding to your partner's bids for connection, attention, affection. That's going to be part of emotional intimacy. Physical touch can be a tool to help promote emotional intimacy. So sometimes through touch, we release oxytocin or lights up the pleasure center in our brain, and we feel emotionally closer to someone through using touch. A key factor in emotional intimacy is what we call intrinsic motivation. So this is like we both get joy and pleasure just from being around each other. You typically don't feel close to someone that you don't enjoy being around, and they don't enjoy being around you too. Feeling cherished is a part of emotional intimacy. So when we feel liked, appreciated, cherished by someone, we tend to feel closer to them. So when all of these factors are in place, we tend to be more emotionally connected. Now, there are many practical, tangible tools that can be learned to help you feel more connected to each other. So if we think of love maps, turning towards fixing some of those ruptures that have happened, express things, we go back to the words of the 5 love languages, words of affirmation. So expressing the good is going to help you feel more connected. Well, physical touch is another 5 love languages. It's going to help you feel more connected. So if you just begin to understand what makes people feel more connected, then certainly that's going to help you feel better. But if we think of what helps in an overall long-term relationship, so we could call it emotional intimacy, we could call it friendship, I suppose, for lack of a better word. But usually that's a key part to a happy, healthy, long-term relationship.
Awesome.
We don't talk about enough.
I would imagine those things play off of each other and feed into each other too. Like when you look at the difference between emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, like if you've ever been physically intimate with somebody and there's no emotional connection, you know that it's really not the same experience, and vice versa. Right? Where I think they just, it's so important to have a balance or a synergy with those things.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have dipped our toes today into some very, very important and impactful topics when it comes to relationships and emotional connection and all sorts of things. I'm really happy to hear that. I was going to be like, hey, you should just make a love maps handout or course. You've already got that handled. It's already there. So it's all at emberrelationshipsychology.com.
Yeah.
Where else can people find you? You want to shout out your Instagram?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Ember Relationship Psychology. That's the biggest place I hang out.
Okay.
A podcast, Relationship Psych, the podcast.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. emberrelationshipsychology.com or Instagram. Those are the places. And if you head over to my website, then there you can find all my other resources, whether it's blogs, podcast, I've got a number of free guides on there. Even like I have a conversation starter. I think it's called the Emotional Intimacy Cheat Sheet. So what it has is a bunch of questions. So if you're struggling, like, what do I ask my partner at the end of the day? I have a question guide. I think there's 36 questions in there to help you talk to your partner at the end of the day. If you're like, what would I ask them? I got a free guide. It'll help you. Just go check it out. Download it.
Wonderful. Yeah. So everyone out there, give yourself some grace that relationship, it's not completely intuitive. It is learned, and you can learn from someone like Amber. So
I feel like I had to learn a lot of it. I had a lot of bad, misguided things. I was like, and then I, found myself divorced at 28. And I was like, well, apparently I should try some of these things I learned in school. I'm happy to say round 2 is going so much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's true. You get all this knowledge and education and stuff, but until we actually can put it into practice ourselves, sometimes it, that just amplifies everything so much.
Yes, putting it into practice is wild. And that's actually one of the huge reasons that I started this, why I really focused on couples. I was like, oh my gosh, if I didn't know how to do this, think of how many other people out there have just never had the resources, the tools, the education to build a great relationship. What if we made it a little easier?
Yeah,
exactly. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Amber. That was a really great jump off point for people that want to get a lot more information and more competence in this very, very important area in their life. So whether you've been in a relationship, are in one, or endeavor to be in one, this podcast was for you, and I hope you took a lot from it. So Thank you so much. Hey, maybe let's do this again. It sounds like there's always lots to talk about.
Oh my gosh, yes. I was so happy to be here today.
Yeah, I hope you'll come back. There's definitely so much more we can talk about with you. So
yeah, I'd love to.
Awesome. Okay, well, Amber and to listeners, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. For additional support or to work with one of us one-on-one, go to our website, www.wellnessdojo.ca. You can also find us on Instagram at Wellness Dojo YYC, or on all other social media platforms searching The Wellness Dojo. We'll see you in the next episode.